Hi everyone, this is Arvind from MindMajix, and today I welcome you all to this amazing session on Django interview questions. So Django is the most popular Python web framework around. It makes it very easy to build web applications more quickly and with less code. So the demand for the Django developer remains high as it is the most sought after skill set right now. Okay, so if you're someone who's aspiring to become a Django developer, it is essential for you to have a strong knowledge of the core Django concepts before appearing for an interview. The whole idea behind making this video is that, so right before the interview, if you watch this video, okay, so this will act as a revision for the concepts that you know about Django. Okay, so in this video, we have covered approximately around 60 questions, and we have classified those 60 questions into 4 categories. The first category is the basic Django interview questions. Then you have Django interview questions for experienced candidates. And then you have the advanced Django interview questions. And the final category is the Django frequently asked questions. I hope everyone is clear with the agenda. So without any further delay, let's begin with our first category of questions, which is basic Django interview questions. Okay, so in this category, the first question is, what is Django and why is it used? Okay, so Django is a high-level Python web framework that enables the rapid development of secure and maintainable websites. It is free and open source. It takes care of much of the hassle of the web development, and it allows you to focus on writing applications without any need to reinvent the wheel. The purpose behind developing this framework is to make developers spend time on new application components instead of already developed components. So there are a few reasons why Django is most preferred. So the first reason is that Django framework is fast and flexible. Second, it suits for any web application development. Third, it is secure and scalable. And finally, it is portable. So these are some of the reasons why Django is one of the most preferred web frameworks. So let's move ahead with the next question. So the next question is Django backend or frontend? So Django is suitable for both backend as well as frontend. It is a collection of Python libraries that allow you to develop useful web applications ideal for backend and frontend purposes. The next question is, what is the latest version of Django and explain its features? Okay, so the latest version of Django is 3.1. The new features of Django are, as you can see on the screen, it supports asynchronous views and middlewares. It provides JSON field support for all of the database backends. It has an admin layout, it has path library, and it provides you with code reusability. So these were some of the features of the latest version of Django. The next question is a very important question. So what is the difference between Python and Django? So both Python and Django are intertwined, but they are not the same. So Python is a programming language which is used for application development, machine learning, artificial intelligence, desktop applications, and so on. On the other hand, Django is a Python web framework which is used for full stack app development and server development. So using core Python, you can build an application from scratch or craft the application with Django using pre-written bits of code. The next question is, what architecture does Django use? So guys, as you can see on the screen, this is the diagram that you must understand before answering this question. So Django follows a model template view architecture or the MTV architecture. So there are 3 components to it, or you can say there are 3 parts to it. The first part is the model. So model is the logical data structure behind the entire application and signified by a database. Then you have the template. So template deals with the presentation of the data. And finally, you also have view. So it is a user interface. So what you see when you visit a website is called a user interface. So that is represented by HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files. The next question is, explain Django architecture. So guys, as you can see on the screen, this is the diagram for Django architecture. So as discussed in the previous question, so Django follows the MTV architecture, which is model, template, and view. So this diagram that you can see on the screen, it represents the working cycle of Django architecture. So from the diagram, you'll notice that the template is on the client side and both the model and the view are on the server side. So Django uses request and response objects to communicate between the client and the server. So if the website receives the request, it is transmitted from the browser to the server to manage the view file using a template. So after sending the correct URL request, the app logic and model initiate the right response to the presented request. So after that, a detailed response is sent back to view to check the response and transmit it as an HTTP response or the desired user format. So then it again passes to the browser via the templates. So to explain this more clearly, so I'll share you a real life example. So while logging into Django based website, you open the login page. So it happens because the view will process the request and it sends it again to the login page URL. So then the response is sent from a server to the browser. After that, you'll enter the credentials in the template and the data sent back to the view to rectify the request, and then the data is presented in the model. So then the model verifies the data provided by the user in the connected database. So if the user's data matches, it sends the related data such as profile name, image, and so on to the views. If the data doesn't match, the model passes the negative results to the views. So that's how the Django MTV architecture works. So I hope the real life example provides you more clarity about the Django architecture. So let's move ahead with the next question. So the next question is, explain Django's code reusability. So compared to other frameworks, Django offers more code reusability. So as Django is a combination of applications, so copying those apps from one directory to another with some tweaks to the settings.py file won't need much time to write new applications from scratch. So that is the reason why Django is the rapid development framework, and this kind of code reusability is not allowed in any other frameworks. The next question is Django easy to learn? So the answer to this question is yes, Django is an easy to learn framework compared to others. So having some knowledge of Python and web working helps you get started with Django. The next question is, what are the unique features of Django that make it a better framework? So there are a few features of Django that makes it stand out from other frameworks. So the first point over here is, compared to other open source technologies, Django offers excellent documentation in the market. So it is a framework, and one of the main reasons that people started using it is that it is the only one that can solve any kind of operation out there. The next feature is that Django is SEO optimized. Apart from that, Django is scalable and can flexibly switch from small to large scale projects. The next point is Django is versatile in nature. Django allows you to build applications for various types of domains. It has a vast community to connect with and share. And last but not the least, it provides you with rapid development of web applications. The next question is, what are the advantages of Django? So Django has many advantages, but we'll look at major ones that differentiate it from other frameworks. So the first point is, it has better CDN connectivity and content management. Next, it is designed as batteries included frameworks. After that, it supports MVC programming paradigm. Next, it provides you with robust security features. Apart from this, it has an accelerated custom web development. And last but not the least, it is compatible with major operating systems and databases. So these were some of the advantages of using Django. The next question is, describe the inheritance styles in Django. So as you can see on the screen, Django offers 3 inheritance styles. The first one is the abstract based classes. So you use this style when you want the parent class to retain the data you don't want to type out for every child model. Next, it is multi-table inheritance. So you use this style when you want to use a subclass on an existing model and want each model to have its database table. So the third one is the proxy model. So you use this style to modify Python level behavior with the models without changing the model's field. The next question is, what are the Django models? So model is a definitive source of information about data defined in the app models.py. So models work as an abstraction layer that structures and manipulates the data. So Django models are subclass of the django.db.models. So model class and the attributes in the models represent the database fields. The next question is, give a brief about the settings.py file or settings.py file. So as the name implies, it is the main settings file of the Django. So everything inside Django project like databases, middlewares, backend engines, templating engines, installed applications, static file addresses, main URL configurations allowed hosts and servers, and security key stores in this file as a dictionary or a list. So when Django files start, it first executes the settings.py file and then loads the respective databases and engines to quickly serve the request. The next question is Django a content management system or a CMS? Okay, so the answer to this question is no, Django is not a CMS. It's just a web framework and a programming tool that allows you to build websites. The next question is, what are static files in Django and how can you set them? So in Django, static files are files that serve the additional purpose such as images, CSS, or JavaScript files. So static files are managed by django.contrib.static files. And there are three main things to do to set up static files in Django. So the first one is set static root in settings.py file. Then you run the manage.py collect static. And third, you set up static files entry on the Python Anywhere web tab. The next question is, what is the use of middlewares in Django? So middlewares in Django is a lightweight plugin that processes during the request and the response execution. So it performs functions like security, CSRF protection, session, authentication, and so on. So Django supports various built-in middlewares. The next question is, what is the difference between char field and text field in Django? So text field is a large text field for large sized text. So in Django, text field is used to store paragraphs and all of that other text data. The default form widget for this field is text area. On the other hand, if you talk about char field, so this is a string field used for small to large sized strings. So it is like a string field in C or C++. So in Django, char field is used to store small strings like first name, last name, and so on. The next question is, describe Django field class types. So every field in a model is an instance of the appropriate field class. So in Django, field class types determine the column type that describes the database about what kind of data is to be stored, such as integer, varchar, text, and so on. So the default HTML widget while rendering a form field is, as you can see on the screen. So this is just an example where you can specify input type as text, and then you have the select. So the minimal validation requirements used in automatically generated forms and the Django admin. The next question is, what is the usage of Django admin.py and manage.py? So guys, this is one of the very important question. So if you successfully answer this question, so this is going to create a very good impression of yours on the interviewer. Okay, so if you talk about Django admin.py, so it is a command line utility for administrative tasks. And if you talk about manage.py, so it is automatically created in each Django project and controls the Django project on the server or even to begin one. So if you talk about its usage, so it manages the project's package on the sys.path and it sets the Django settings module environment variable. The next question is, what are signals in Django? So Django includes a signal dispatcher to notify decoupled applications when some action takes place in the framework. In a nutshell, the signal allows specific senders to inform a suite of receivers that some action has occurred. So they are instrumental when we use more pieces of code in the same events. So Django provides a set of built-in signals that enable the users to get notified of specific actions. So there are various signals in Django such as django.db.models.signals.presave or django.db.models.signals.postsave. Okay. Apart from this, you also have django.db.models.signals.predelete or django.db.models.signals.postdelete. Okay, so these were some of the examples of the signals which are used in Django. So guys, with this, we have covered the basic or the freshers interview questions for Django. The next category of questions from 21st onwards is the Django interview questions for the experienced folks. Okay, so for those candidates who have at least 2 to 3 years of experience in Django, so these questions are going to be very useful for you in the actual interview. So let's begin with the next question. So the next question is, what is the difference between a project and an application in Django? So the app is a module that deals with the dedicated requirements in a project. On the other hand, the project covers an entire application. So in Django terms, a project can contain different applications while an application features in various projects. The next question is, explain Django URL in brief. So Django allows you to design URL functions the way you want. So for this, you need to create a Python module informally called a URL conf or URL configuration. So this module is a purely Python code and acts as a mapping between the URL path, expressions, and Python functions. So also this mapping can be as long or short as needed and can also reference other mappings. So the length of this mapping can be as long as short as required, and it can also reference other mappings. So Django also provides a way to translate URLs according to the active language. The next question is, what are Django exceptions? So an exception is an abnormal event that leads to program failure. So Django uses exception classes and Python exceptions as well to deal with such situations. So we define Django core exceptions in the django.core.exceptions. So there are various classes in this module, and to give you an example, there are exceptions such as object does not exist, empty result set, field does not exist, multiple objects return, suspicious operations, permission denied, view does not exist, middleware not used, field error, and so on. So these were some of the examples of the exceptions in Django. The next question is, explain Django session. So Django uses the session to keep a track of the state between the site and a particular browser. So Django supports anonymous sessions. So the session framework stores and retrieves data on per site visitor basis. So it stores the information on the server side and it supports sending and receiving of the cookies. So cookies store the data of the session ID, but not the actual data itself. The next question is, what are Django cookies? So a cookie is a piece of information stored in the client's browser. So to set and fetch cookies, Django provides built-in methods. So we use setCookie method for setting a cookie and the get method for getting the cookie. So you can also use the request.cookies array to get the cookie values. So guys, the next question is very important. So the next question is, what is the difference between Flask and Django? Okay. So guys, whenever you're asked such kind of question in the interview, so what you can do is you can take a piece of paper from the interviewer, and on that piece of paper, you can draw two columns, the one for Django and the other one for Flask. Okay. And in this column, you have the comparison factor. Okay. So if you talk about the first point, which is the creation or the created. So Django is a web development framework for Python, and it was created in 2005. And Flask is a web micro framework offering basic features of web application, and it was created in the year 2010. Okay, so Django is much older and Flask is a bit newer. So if you talk about the project type, so Django is a high-level Python web framework for easy and simple projects, whereas Flask is a low-level Python web framework. If you talk about features of Django, so the best features of Django are, it is open source, it provides rapid development, it has robust documentation, it has great community support, and it is very easy to learn. On the other hand, if you talk about Flask, so the best features of Flask is, it is open source, it is lightweight, it requires less code to develop an application. So now if you talk about the type of framework, so Django is a full stack web framework. Whereas if you talk about Flask, so Flask is a web server gateway interface framework. So the next point is templates, admin, and ORM. So Django has built-in feature for templates, admin, and ORM. Whereas on the other hand, for Flask, it requires manual installation. So if you talk about few more points, the next point is flexibility. So Django web framework supports a large number of third-party applications. On the other hand, if you talk about Flask, so Flask web framework doesn't support third-party applications. So if you talk about companies using Django, so the companies that use Django are Instagram, Coursera, Udemy, and so on. On the other hand, There are companies using Flask such as Netflix, Reddit, Lyft, MIT, and so on. So if you talk about visual debugging, so Django does not support visual debugging. On the other hand, Flask supports visual debugging. So if you talk about bootstrapping tool, so there's a built-in bootstrapping tool in Django, whereas this feature or bootstrapping tool is not available in Flask. If you talk about working style, so Django offers monolithic working style, whereas Flask offers diversified working style. And the last point of comparison is the project layout. In Django, the structure of the project layout is conventional, whereas in Flask, the structure of the project layout is random. Okay, so these were some of the key differences between Django and Flask. So guys, let's move ahead with the next question. So the next question is how to check the version of Django installed on your system. Okay, so to check the version of the Django installed on your system, so what you need to do is you simply need to open the command prompt, and in the command prompt you have to type py space -m space Django space -version. So once you execute this command, you'll get the version of the Django which is installed on your system. Okay, so there's another way of doing this. So what you can do is you can try to import Django and use the get version method. As you can see on the screen, what you need to do is you have to type this import Django in the first line. Then what you have to do is you have to print Django.getVersion method. Okay, so once you execute these two lines, so you'll get the latest version of Django which is installed on your system. The next question is give a brief about Django Admin. So Django Admin is the command line utility for administrative tasks. So it is a preloaded interface to fulfill all of the web developers' needs and is imported from Django.contrib packages. So Django Admin interface has its user authentication and offers advanced features like authorizing the access, CMS or the content management systems, managing various models, and so on. So you can perform some basic tasks using Django Admin, such as the first command for Django Admin is Django Admin help. So this command displays the usage of the information and commands list provided by each application. So there's another command called Django Admin help command. So this command displays all of the commands that are available for the Django Admin. Next, you have the Django Admin version. So this command determines the Django's version that is available on your system. Apart from this, you also have Django Admin run server. So this command starts the development server. Okay, so these were some of the examples that you can use or the commands that you can use as a Django admin. The next question is, how do you create a Django project? So to create a Django project, what you have to do is you have to navigate to the directory where you want to do a project, and you have to type the command, as you can see on the screen, Django admin start project, and this is the project name, which is ABC. So once you execute this command, so that will create an ABC folder with folder structure such as manage.py, my project, and inside my project you will add init.py file, settings.py file, urls.py, and wsgi.py. Okay, so this is the general hierarchy of a Django project. The next question is, name some companies that are using Django. Okay, so there are various companies out there in the market that use Django, such as Instagram, Pinterest, Udemy, Mozilla, Reddit, and so on. The next question is, how do Django views work? So Django views are the critical component of the framework. They serve the purpose of encapsulation. So they encapsulate the logic liable to process the user's request and return a response to the user. So either they return the HTTP response or raise an exception such as the 404 in Django. So besides, View also perform tasks like reading records from a database, generating PDF files, and so on. So every app in Django comes with a views.py file, and this contains the views function. So views function can be imported directly in the URLs file in Django. So to achieve that, you have to import the view function in the urls.py file first, and then you have to add the path or the URL that the browser should request to call that view function. So let's move to the next question. The next question is, give a brief about Django Template. So Django templates generate dynamic web pages. So using templates, you can show static data and the data from various databases connected to the application through a context dictionary. So you can create any number of templates based on the project requirements. So it is even okay to have none of the templates. So Django Template Engine handles the templating in the Django web framework. So some template syntaxes declare variables, filters, control logic, and comments. So Django ships built-in backends for its template system called the Django Template Language, or the DTL. The next question is, describe Django ORM. In Django, the most notable feature is Object Relational Mapper, which allows you to interact with the application data from various relational databases such as SQLite, MySQL, and Postgres. So Django ORM is the abstraction between the web application data structure, which is models, and the database where the data is stored. So without writing any code, you can retrieve, delete, save, and perform other operations over the database. So the main advantage of ORMs is rapid development. So ORMs makes project more portable. So it is easier to change the database with the Django ORM. The next question is, when to use iterators in Django ORM. So iterators are containers in Python containing several elements. So every object in the iterator implements two methods that are init and the next method. So in Django, the fair use of an iterator is when you process results that take up a large amount of memory. So for this, you can use the iterator method, which evaluates the query set and it returns the corresponding iterator over the results. The next question is, what is Django caching? Explain the strategies used to implement it. So caching is the process of saving expensive calculation output to avoid performing the same calculation again. So Django supports a robust cache system to save web pages such that they don't have to be evaluated repeatedly for each of the requests. So there are a few strategies to implement caching in Django, such as the first strategy is memcached. So this is the most efficient and faster memory-based cache server. The next is file system caching. So it caches files stored in serial order in separate files. The next one is the local memory caching. So if you have not specified any other, so this is the default cache. So it is per process and threads safe as well. The last caching is the database caching. So cache data will be stored in the database and it works okay if you have a well-indexed database server. The next question is, how does Django process a request? So whenever the Django server receives a request, the system follows an algorithm to determine which Python code needs the execution. So if you talk about these steps, so in the first step, Django checks the root URL configuration. Next, Django looks at the variable URL patterns in the URL conf for the match of the requested URL. After that, if the URL matches, it returns the associated view function. After that, it will then request the data from the model of that application for any data requirement and it passes it to the corresponding template rendered by the browser. And finally, Django sends an error handling view if none of the URLs match the requested URL. The next question is, which Python version should be used with Django? So Python 3 is the most recommended version for Django. And the reason for this is it is faster, it has more features, and there is better support available. The next question is, explain the file structure of a typical Django project. So a typical Django project consists of the following files. So as you can see on the screen, the first one is the manage.py file. So manage.py is the command line utility of your Django project and it controls the Django project on the server. Then you have the settings.py file. So it includes the information on all of the applications installed in the project. Next is the init.py file. So init.py file is an empty file that makes the Python interpreter understand that the directory consisting of settings.py is a module or a package. After that, you have the urls.py file. So urls.py file acts as a map for the whole web project. And finally, you have the wsgi.py file. So this file is for the server format wsgi. The next question is, why is Django called a loosely coupled framework? So Django is known as a loosely coupled framework because of its MTV architecture. So Django's architecture is a variant of the MVC architecture, and MTV is beneficial because it completely discards server code from the client's machine. So models and views are present on the client machine and the template only returns to the client. All the architecture components are different from each other. So both the front end and the back end developers can work simultaneously on the projects, as they won't affect each other when they are changed. The next question is, what is Django REST framework, or the DRF? So Django REST framework is a flexible and a powerful toolkit for building web APIs rapidly. So there are significant reasons that make the REST framework perfect choice for Django, such as it has web browsable API, and there are in-place authentication policies. After that, it has a serialization feature as well, and it has extensive documentation and an excellent community support. So it is perfect for web applications since they have low bandwidth. So global companies like Red Hat, Mozilla, Heroku, Eventbrite, and so on trust this framework. So guys, with this, we have come to the end of the experience set of Django interview questions. And from 41 onwards, we have questions for the advanced Django interview questions. Okay, so this set of questions is for those folks who have at least 4 to 5 years of experience working in Django. Okay, so the next question is Django too monolithic? Okay, so Django framework is monolithic, which is valid to some extent. As Django architecture is MTV based, so it requires some rules that developers need to follow to execute the appropriate files at the right time. So with Django, you get significant customizations with implementations. So through this, you cannot change the file names, variable names, and predefined lists. So Django's file structure is a logical workflow. So thus the monolithic behavior of Django helps developers to understand the project efficiently. The next question is, explain user authentication in Django. So Django comes with a built-in user authentication system to handle objects such as user, groups, permissions, and so on. So it not only performs authentication, but it performs authorization as well. So there are some of the system objects in Django, such as users, groups, password hashing system, permissions, a pluggable backend system, and forms validation. So apart from this, there are various third-party web applications that we can use instead of the default system to provide more user authentication with more features. The next question is, what is the Django.shortcuts.render function? So when a view function returns a web page as HTTP response, instead of a simple string, we use the render function. So render is a shortcut for passing a data dictionary with a template. So this function uses a templating engine to combine templates with a data dictionary. So finally, the render function returns the HTTP response with rendered text and the model's data. The next question is, what is the use of forms in Django? So forms serve the purpose of receiving user inputs and using the data for logical operation on databases. So Django supports form class to create the HTML forms. So it defines a form and how it works and appears. So if you talk about Django forms, so there are a few parts of it, such as it prepares and restructures the data to make it ready for rendering. It creates the HTML forms for the data. It processes submitted forms and the data from the client. The next question is, can you explain how to add view functions to the urls.py file? So there are two ways to add the view function to the main URLs config. So the first one is adding a function view. So in this method, you import the particular views function and add the specific URL to the URLs pattern list. The next way is by adding a class-based view. So this one is more of a class-based approach. For this, import the class from the views.py file and then add the URL to the URL patterns. An inbuilt method is needed to call the class as a view. So both the function-based and the class-based have their advantages and disadvantages. So depending upon the situation in hand, you can use them to get the desired results. The next question is, explain Django security. So protecting users' data is an essential part of any website design. So Django implements various sufficient protections against several common threats. So if you talk about the features of Django security, so as you can see on the screen, these are the various features such as cross-site scripting protection, SQL injection protection, then cross-site request forgery protection or CSRF protection. Then you also have enforcing SSL or HTTPS. Apart from that, you also have section security, clickjacking protection, and host header validation. So the next question is, what is Ajax in Django? So Ajax is nothing but asynchronous JavaScript and XML. And this allows web pages to update asynchronously to and from the server by exchanging the data in Django. So that means without reloading a complete web page, you can update parts of the web page. So it involves a combination of a browser, built-in XML HTTP request object, HTML DOM, and JavaScript. The next question is how to handle Ajax requests in Django. So to handle the Ajax request in Django, what you do is you perform the following functions, or you can say the following steps. So first you initialize the project, then you create the models. After that, you create the views. Then you write the URLs and you carry out the request with jQuery Ajax. And finally, you register models to the admin. The next question is, what are Django generic views? So writing views is a heavy task. So Django offers an easy way to set the views called generic views. So they are classes but not functions and are stored in django.views.generic. So generic views act as a shortcut for common usage patterns. So they take some common idioms and patterns in view development and abstract them to write common views of data without repeating yourself quickly. The next question is, what is the correct way to make a variable available to all of your templates? So in case all your templates need the same objects, so what you can do is you can use the request context. So this method takes HTTP request as the first parameter and populates the context with a few variables simultaneously as per the engine context processor configuration option. So guys, with this, we have come to the end of the advanced Django interview questions. And the next set of questions is Django frequently asked questions. Okay, so let's move ahead with the next question. So tell me how to use a file-based session. So for this, we have to set the session engine settings to django.contrib.sessions.backends.file. So guys, this was more of a scenario-based question. Okay, so for those folks who have good amount of hands-on experience with Django, so such candidates will be easily able to answer such kind of questions. So now let's move ahead with the next question. So what command line loads data in Django? So Django admin.py load data loads the data in Django. So this command line performs data searching and loads the contents of the named fixtures into the database. The next question is, what do you mean by CRUD? Okay, so CRUD is an acronym for create, read, update, and delete. So it is a mnemonic framework used for constructing models when building application programming interface or the APIs. The next question is, explain Django's request response cycle. So when a process starts, the Django server receives the request and it checks for the matching URL in the project defined URL patterns. So if the URL matches, it executes the associated code in the view file with the URL and it sends a response. So if the server can't find a matching URL, it invokes a 404 status code. The next question is, what is the use of middleware in Django? So basically, there are 4 functions that you can use middleware for in Django. The first one is cross-site request forgery protection. Then you have the content gzipping. After that, you have user authentication. And finally, you have the session management. The next question is, does Django support multiple column primary keys? So the answer to this question is, Django does not support multiple column primary keys. So it only supports single column primary keys. The next question is, what is a query set? So in the context of Django, query set is a set of SQL queries. To see the SQL query from the Django filter call, type the command print and b.query. So once you print b.query, you'll be able to see the SQL query from the Django filter call. The next question is, how to check the raw SQL queries running in Django? So first you have to make sure that the debug setting is set to true, and then you have to type 2 commands, or you can say 2 lines. So the first one is from django.db import connection, and then you have to type connection.queries. So once you execute these 2 lines, you will be able to check the raw SQL queries which are currently running in Django. The next question is, Are Django signals asynchronous? So the answer to this question is no. Django signals are synchronous. So there is no background thread or asynchronous jobs to execute them. So when we use signals in applications, they allow you to maintain the code, to understand the application behavior, and solve the issues faster and better. And the next question is, what are the Django disadvantages? Okay, so Django is not suitable for small projects due to its monolithic size. Apart from this, everything in Django connects on Django ORM. Next, everything must be defined explicitly due to lack of convention. And finally, Django Web Framework has a steep learning curve. So these were some of the disadvantages of using Django. So guys, with this, we have come to the end of this session on Django interview questions. Okay, so we have tried to cover maximum questions in this video. And if you have any kinds of doubts or queries related to this session, then you can write your doubts and queries in the comment section. And my team is here to help you with all of your queries. Okay, so guys, I wish you all the very best for your upcoming Django interview. And I hope this video will help you in clearing this interview. Okay, so thank you so much for being with us and have a very good day.